Let me just, as a way of introduction and a short one, because he's family, Mike is here today to kind of impart to us an element of himself, much like a restoration minister. Terry said a while back, and Mike would probably agree, that in the day, a pastor's role was to know and not be known. And I think what Mike has demonstrated as a pastor and a counselor is that he does believe in the know, and he also believes in the to be known. So in this context, Mike is going to share a little bit more of his journey, both, whatever he decides, he's deciding with the Lord's preparation for this day. I was blessed to hang out with him for another hour this week, and I shared this with him. I'm going to share it with you because I think it's a vital lesson that I'm learning, and I think we all need to learn, is that I realized that he's a busy guy, and he takes time out and allows me to come in and sit, and oftentimes I'm very task-oriented. He almost laughs without doing so. With some of the work, I bring in stuff to his office, and I'm ready to take that hour and just go after it. And then he'll kind of like break the whole thing by saying, "Jeff, how are you doing?" And that wasn't in my pile of agenda of things to do. So God has used him in mighty ways to remind me that he cares deeply about me more than he cares about the ministry of restoration ministers. So that's huge. And then this week, when I was sitting there, or before I went, I said, I can call him, because he already knows what he's going to do. There's no reason for me to have to go there. And then I just said, I just want to be there. I just want to get out of church and go see a friend and just be with him. And that was such a huge blessing. Again, I think so many of us get trapped into the doing part that we forget the richness of the being part. So I got to just be so blown away again by God's love for me through a friend who just cared to just be an attentive listener, engaged with me. We enjoyed an hour together, and as he reminded me, this is a mutual benefit. So I pray that, Mike, you will again experience today the mutual benefit of being faithful and coming and speaking into this group today. So let's just pray for Mike right now. I just want to welcome him up here, but also pray for him and just ask the Spirit of the living God to do an amazing work over him. And I don't know if we can come too close right now, but I'll try to stay from a distance here. Father God, we just thank you for Mike. Thank you for his journey. We thank you that it's been a healing journey. We thank you that it's been a fruit-filled one. We thank you for the fruit of the Spirit that is demonstrated in Mike's life, that we are all blessed to be on a journey with him and to receive and be imparted with the amazing things that you've done in him. May you do something in all of us today as a special gift from you to take what you've had in this willing vessel and just to breathe life into it, into the rest of us this morning. We'll trust you more than we'll even trust Mike for that. In Jesus' name.
Beat me up, Scotty. So, I consider this to be more like a fireside chat than an actual presentation. And I think it's funny because this is supposed to be about transparency, really letting yourself be known, my journey, and putting this contraption on. My wife was trying to adjust it earlier. I feel like I'm Dumbo this morning. My ears are sticking out. They're probably 2 feet by 2 feet. But so, this is about transparency, about my journey. But Jeff talked to me last week. He said, I just want you to come and share about your journey. So I emailed him a day or two later. I said, well, what are you talking about? My journey about becoming a counselor in Colorado Springs, or my life journey, what's happened throughout the course of my life? And he writes back, yes. So kind of do whatever you want to do the whole thing. I think it's, in a sense, much easier to teach a lesson than it is to try and talk about your story. Because I'm not a hugely transparent person, in all honesty. I developed early on, and you'll notice as we go through some of my journey, the skill of asking questions. And I can fend people off. My wife in particular, I have a mentor from years and years ago. His name is Ron Harris. He and I sort of outdo each other in being able to not disclose about ourselves and bring other people into the process. So many years ago, my wife, when I would ask her a question, she'd say, no, you answer it first. Because she knew that that was my way of hiding. I can hide for a long period of time. Part of the hiding has to do with, by nature and personality, I'm just very quiet. I don't need to talk a lot. And I can spend a lot of time in isolation and feel very comfortable with that. And in a sense, that is one strength of our marriage. We can be together in the same space and not have to talk. I think both of us enjoy and appreciate this period of our lives, which we're empty nesters. Our son and our grandson and our daughter-in-law live only 1.5 miles away, so we can engage when we want to. We can withdraw when we want to. So we like space, we like quiet, and so revealing things about myself, that's not always the most comfortable thing to do. At the same time, I don't know why I'm sitting here. One of the things that's been miraculous about my life is I have always felt, in spite of how immature I could be at times, and how many mistakes I could make at times, the favor of God somehow just rests upon me at various times. And I have no way of, certainly didn't earn it, certainly it was just a gift, but when I think about how did I get started in counseling, and why do I have a clinic, and we have 9 or 10 therapists in the office, and we do everything from child therapy all the way through adult therapy and couples therapy. How does that happen? In 1993, we came to Colorado Springs really not knowing what the future was like. Pretty much 20 years of pastoral ministry. We were burned out. I had burned my family out. My achievement, perfectionism, my desire to slay dragons and conquer kingdoms had really put us in a very bad place. And God graciously put me in the middle of a medical clinic with 4 medical doctors who wanted me to work with their staff and their patients and pay me a salary to do that. Nobody gets that done for them when they start a counseling practice. One of the hardest things to do, and in particular in Colorado Springs, is to start a counseling practice. It takes at least 2 years of very hard work, and even at that, you might only be part-time. There's a glut of counselors in Colorado Springs and in Colorado, and there's a shortage of psychiatrists. If you're a psychiatrist, you can come to Colorado Springs and pretty much write your own ticket. So the person who was supervising me at the time in 1993 to be licensed as a counselor in Colorado, when he found out that I was gifted pretty much this practice, handed to me on a silver platter, because I had instant referrals from 4 doctors. I didn't have to do any administrative work. All the billing was done by receptionists. All the appointments were made by administrative people. All the phones were answered by other people. I just sat in my little 9 by 12 medical office, and just people would just come in. And it was like my supervisor looked at me and said, "That's not fair. You can't do that. I had to work to get to this place." So in spite of my goofiness, I consider myself to be a very goofy person. Not funny, humorous goofy, but just, I've got quirks. You know, my wife can tell you some of them that drive her crazy at times. But here I am, wanting to, and having been given the assignment to be transparent. My turn. This, more than anything, capsulizes for me what I would like to have happen in my life. I've not arrived. I am not there. But what if it were less important that anything ever gets fixed than that nothing ever has to be hidden? Listen, the church is all about fixing people. All about making them better, all about getting them on a certain track, making sure that they do things in a certain way, making sure that we're doing the creed. But what about the fact that honesty and openness is really the most necessary thing? Because we can hide all day long. We can run all day long. I can run all day long. Let me suggest a book to you. It's captured my attention the last couple of months. I've read it. I'm reading it to my wife. I'm giving it to friends. It has totally enthralled me. I read 1 or 2 pages and I go, wow, I need to go think about that. The book is called The Cure, and the subtitle I love. What if God isn't who you think He is, and neither are you? This is half allegory and half teaching. The allegory part is really gripping in the sense that a man is on a journey, a spiritual journey. He knows Christ as his personal Savior, but he's on this journey and he's trying to find himself, and he can't quite figure out, why do I keep messing up all the time? So he comes to a fork in the road on his journey with Christ, and one sign points to the left, to the room of good intentions. The other road points to the right, and it's the road of trust. So he's in a quandary, he doesn't know what to do. And he thinks, well, I want to do things right. I want to have the right motivations. I want to be seen as having, the right behaviors, so I better go the road of good intentions. Trust seems a little too risky. Trust seems like, I don't know, can I really trust that God will be there for me? After all, isn't it my responsibility to do things right? So he goes the road of good intentions. Eventually, through a lot of frustration, he realizes that that's the wrong road. He comes back to the fork in the road and begins to go down the road of trust. And later on, before we close, I'm going to read a section to you of what life is like, because the road of trust leads into the room of grace. Not cheap grace, but grace in the idea and the concept of understanding who He really is in Christ. That it's not up to Him to fix Himself. It's not up to Him to make Himself better. It's up to Him to realize and live within the identity that Christ has purchased for him. And he has a friend who walks this path with him. And his friend is a little further down the road, so he's able to give him a little further insight. But the one thing that he doesn't try to do, he doesn't try to fix his friend. And if I were to say my greatest faux pas in life, my greatest stumbling block is I'm great at making everything about it. Unfortunately, that's not just career that happens to involve people. And it's been, I think, my largest, most significant learning curve, and I'm not there yet. I still can fall into that tendency. So I came up with a couple of scriptures that I think summarize this area of honesty. Make this your common practice. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you can live together whole and healed. The Message. Out of Phillips' paraphrase, you should get into the habit of admitting your sins to each other and praying for each other so that if sickness comes, if sickness comes to you, you may be healed. So are we in the habit of being transparent? Are we in the habit of really confessing the things that cause us to stumble? One of the, I think, great blessings of my wife's life in the last 7 or 8 years is she's been in the same group of women, meeting several times a month, and they go deep. They talk about the nitty-gritty things that's going on in their lives, and they pray for each other. And I think there's probably more honesty and transparency in that group of women than in any group I've ever heard of or been a part of myself. The leader of the group talks about submarining, going deep and getting there quickly. And, by and large, that just lacks in the church. We have a lot of secrets. We keep a lot of secrets that nobody ever knows about. We don't ever tell anybody. Hopefully, somewhere along the pathway, there's a friend, there's a person who can take that on board without judging you and without having a sense of having to fix you. Fixing sin is like trying to fix a crumpled slinky. You may think if you just sit on it long enough, it'll straighten out. Sitting there, you think that you've really got a handle on straightening that stuff out. No matter how long you sit, when you get up, that slinky springs right back. Compromised coiled metal doesn't straighten out by external pressure, and neither does sin. In the room of good intentions, people are trying to fix others because they've lost the conviction of the power of God's love, the power to live out a new identity. We're afraid grace keeps people from taking things seriously, so we discount the power of love worked out in grace through trust. Grace is a gift only the non-religious can accept. They're the only ones who can understand it and put it to use. Religious folk see grace soft and weak. So they keep trying to manage their junk with willpower and tenacity. Nothing defines religion quite as well as attempting impossible tasks with limited power, all the while pretending that it's working. A healthy friend and protector depends on Christ's life in you to be enough. One of the things that I consider to be a strength for me, I really can and do appreciate the fact of Jesus in you. I have confidence that Jesus in you is going to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. That I don't have a huge agenda. When people walk into my office for counseling, one of the reasons that they stay and they keep coming back is because they feel safe. And they understand at some point, I don't have a huge agenda. I don't really know what I'm doing. Seriously. I sit there sometimes going, what in the world am I going to do with this? Because one of the things that's very true about counseling is when you think you've heard it all, somebody's going to come up with something that's just going to turn you 180 degrees and you'll think, I don't have an answer for that. But I don't have to have an answer. The confidence that Jesus in you can accomplish what needs to be accomplished sometimes only needs a wide berth of time for somebody to tell their story. I cannot tell you the number of times that people have said, wow, somebody actually listened to my entire story. I'm not very quick to try and intervene to come up with a solution. So, my family. I'm going to suggest this at the end of our time, that you take some time to do this. This would be your experiential. We won't do it in class, but it would be a great thing to do between classes. I sat down and thought for a long time about my family. The good parts. What were the good parts of my growing up? It was very stable and predictable. I had a father, I had a mother, my dad went to work, my mom by and large stayed home. She took care of the house, he took care of the paycheck. It was just always consistent. I always knew there was going to be a meal. I always knew there would be clean clothes. I always knew the bed would be made. I always knew that things would just unfold the way they were supposed to. Number two, more than adequate provision, but not indulged. I was not indulged as a child, but I was treated well. Gifts, birthdays, vacations. Number three, good vacations, usually with extended family. I have a unique situation where my mother's, how does this work? My mother's brother married my father's sister, and they all four of them went off to Carson City, Nevada, and eloped and got married together. So I ended up in the process with 7 cousins. I was the youngest of 7 cousins. And we spent most of our free time in our extended family environment. We lived in Northern California, and it was a great time growing up. People often ask, well, when did you start counseling? And I, not too jokingly say, about the age of 4. Why? I have no idea. But the other 6 cousins would come to me and say, hey, can you help me with this? I got a problem. Can you figure this out? Why is so-and-so happy? What is this about? And literally, ever since a very young age, I have been the family counselor. We used to have, to my wife's chagrin and my kids' chagrin, these family meetings, and Mike was supposed to fix it all. You know, at some point, I really decided I needed to resign that position. And if I was to encourage you about one thing, do not counsel your family, and do not counsel your friends. You will get caught in between somewhere, and you will not be appreciated. Number 4, loyalty. I have never ever questioned the fact that my family was loyal to me. My parents would stay married even though they were miserable at times for the 50 years or more. Loyalty was a part of our extended family. We had each other's back. There was a sense of consistency in that sense. 5, instilled hard work ethic. At 13 years of age, my dad, by deception, got me into the retail clerks union so that I could start to work. By 13, I was buying my own clothes, saving my own money, having my own job, taking my friends out for pizza. It was great. Mike will pay for everything. I was taught orderliness and organization. Cleanliness is next to godliness. I heard that phrase throughout my life. Now, I was not a Christian growing up. I was exposed to some spiritual values, but I was not a Christian for sure. When I became a Christian at about the age of 21, and I read the Bible for the first time, I went back to my mom and said, Mom, cleanliness next to godliness is not in the Bible. She was stunned. She sat there in silence for about 15 seconds and said, well, it should be. Demanded respect for elders and for people in general. I was disciplined for inappropriate behaviors. Generosity was demonstrated, especially by my dad. He gave and gave and gave. My parents owned grocery stores growing up. And it was kind of a constant tension between my mom and dad, because my dad would give the store away, and my mom would be saying, George, you can't keep doing that. But I was taught generosity. No addictions to speak of, although that should not have been the case. When I talk about my family of origin and generational patterns, there is enough addictions to go around, but neither of my parents were addicted. Yummy meals, Mom was a great cook. Number 12, pursue excellence. Always there was a sense of attempting to do your very best. Modeled and taught financial responsibility. One of the blessings, I think, of our marriage is the fact that we have a similar value and belief about money. So we've not had huge financial struggles and discussions and problems, and one person spends and the other person saves. We have a similar value for money. That value for money was taught to my wife by her parents. They were by and large savers and investors, and my parents did the same thing. That has served us well. One of the things that's very difficult is I get lots of couples in my office that have spent, one person has spent themselves into tremendous debt. 14, instill basic spiritual awareness. Only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. That plaque was on the kitchen wall. It was there from the time I can remember how to read to the time I left home. It was never discussed, not one time. I can't remember a prayer at mealtime, a single time. But that plaque had some impact on my life. Okay, I didn't know Christ, but I knew that there was a spiritual battle. My family, the not so good parts. The environment was tense and guarded. It was always kind of like, okay, let's take, where's the weather blowing? Where's the wind blowing? What's the temperature like? What's going on in here? So there's always a sense of when you entered the environment, you had to figure out what was going on because it was tense. It was difficult to relax. Number 2, there was a lot of criticism and scrutiny. I've talked before about my helicopter mom, who scrutinized everything you did, and you could do it better, why don't you do it this way? And if I made the bed, well, she would unmake the bed and remake the bed the right way. So I stopped making the bed. Why fool it? Number 3, inappropriate teasing and name calling and labeling. Oh my gosh, it drove my wife crazy when she saw us interact as a family. Because everybody was just always jabbing and kidding and teasing, and I hate teasing. Lack of any true emotional connection. We didn't really talk about heartfelt things. We didn't really talk about what was happening emotionally. If I was angry and upset about something, well, a parent had a greater reason and more of a right to be angry, and you better surrender your right to be angry. A great deal of emphasis placed on appearance and performance. Here I am in my nice Argyle sweater, and my slacks, and my shiny shoes. Appearance was really a big thing growing up. I mean, what are the neighbors going to think? So, don't act out, don't be stupid. Straighten up here, fly right. Number 6, an absence of nurture and affection. I have a pretty non-affectionate mother. Never really sat in the lap, never had a story read to me. I had times when our kids were growing up, Jan is this very, very, very nurturing person. And the kids would be huddled around her. And I remember one time, as a family, I think, we watched the movie Hook with Robin Williams. Anybody ever seen that movie? Okay, the beginning of that movie, there's this great kid's bedroom, and there's this tent, and Grandma is there reading books to the kids, and I cried when I first saw that. I thought, people really do that? People really experience that? And then I would see that with Jan, and I'd like, can I be a part of that? Can I feel a little bit of that? Can I get involved in some of that? That's just so warm and nurturing. One of this non-nurturing mother who didn't know how to display care outside of tasks. About 5 years ago, it's my habit to go up to Denver and take my mom out to church on Mother's Day, and Jan and I go together, and then we take her out to lunch. Well, I got this brainstorm that about 5 years ago, I said, Jan, I'm going to go up by myself. I sat down with a tablet of paper. I wrote down all of my questions of why. And I went up to confront my mom in a loving way and say, why was our family so screwed up? And I warned her before time, it's just me coming out, Mom, and I want to have a heart-to-heart conversation. And I would say the majority of people never, ever get that privilege. I took her out to the restaurant after church and sat down with my tablet of paper and my pen, and I started into asking my questions. And she said, Mike, put your pen down. Turn your tablet over. I got something I want to tell you. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, I should never have been a mother. I didn't know how to nurture. I didn't know how to love. I didn't know how to embrace. I knew how to do tasks. I could cook. I could clean. I could straighten things up. Our house was so sterile. There was an entire living room full of furniture that nobody was allowed to sit on. It lasted 40 years. My dad, my brother, and myself, when a guest would come in the house and sit in one of those chairs, what's going to happen? But with tears in her eyes, she began to explain how much she had let me down, and how she knew that left a big hole in my heart, and how she knew that that had really spurred me in all kinds of different directions to try and get the attention and the appreciation and the affection and the accolades and the whatever was needed to fill up that hole. And it was an amazing healing time in our lives, so that we could actually end up praying together, laughing together about some of the craziness, and getting a little bit of healing from that point. I think I'm on 8. Oh, no, 7. Often disciplined out of anger and without getting all the facts. I had a tremendous stuttering problem as a kid growing up. I had one older brother, about 2.5 years older, and my brother could sell you the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay? He is great with words. He has a great personality. He's an extrovert. And I had this stuttering problem. He would do things that my parents said, don't do that. And then he'd blame me. And my dad or mom would come along, hey, Calvin said you did such and such. I'm like, no. And I'd get spanked before the facts would ever come out. Because I didn't know how to articulate it. One of my greatest fears in being called into the ministry is, how am I ever going to speak in front of people? Because I had this stuttering problem. And God's kind of grown me up. Higher education, career direction, not much attention given to that. Spiritual emphasis based on guilt and shame. Guilt and shame, those were like mantras for our family. You know, if you wanted to get somebody to do something, well, shame them, guilt them into doing it. That works every time. Spiritual emphasis based on guilt and shame. 10, sex not talked about in a healthy way, it talked about it all. If I went into how my sex education was like, oh my gosh, you would curl your hair. No healthy example of how to resolve interpersonal conflict. Task-oriented, but usually worked alone independently. And sexual abuse by an older brother and family secrets. Family secrets. You know, it was really hard the first time, I think it was the first time that Jan and I went to intensive counseling. We'd been through 2 bouts of intensive counseling. The first one about 15 years ago. And having to admit and come to terms with the fact that, yeah, I was sexually abused. I didn't want to do those things, but the pressure of an older sibling and the way in which things would get constructed, found myself in situations I can recall the fact that it was abhorrent at the time. I was too young for it. I didn't have a place to put that in a healthy way. So yeah, sexual abuse, family secrets. As an adult, I was at the airport with my wife one time, picking up my favorite uncle, who had been in our wedding, Uncle Bob. He's going to turn 100 years old next June. And he pulls me aside at the airport. My parents were there. I'm in my 30s. And he says, "Hey, Mike, is your brother still in prison?" I look at my folks and go, "Calvin's in prison?" They said, "Well, yeah, he's been there for a couple of years." I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" "Well, we don't hang out our dirty laundry in front of just anybody." Yes, family secrets. Identity crisis. Who am I? Stage 1. It's time for others to fix me. I grew up with a sense of I'm a project to be fixed and someone to be tolerated or endured. My message, my script, that I've had to deal with and have God change in my life is, "You're just a bother. Just get out of the way. You're just a bother. Leave me alone. I can do this better, faster, more completely if you just would leave me alone." That was the message that I grew up with, and that impacted our marriage in a negative way. What are the effects of having that kind of a message? Of being a project? Well, the effects are something like this. Try to be invisible as much as possible. Disappear, evaporate, make yourself not present. Become very self-conscious. Always aware of, okay, what's the environment, what's going on, who's going to say what, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. So very self-conscious, which makes you very self-absorbed. Excel to gain approval. That was the best way to get some accolades. Just excel, do the best you can. Become self-critical. Oh my gosh. If I would do something wrong, if I would disappoint myself, well, that was reasons for incredible self-flagellation. Beat yourself up, beat myself up all day long, not give myself a break. Find ways to meet your own emotional needs, self-soothing strategies, project the correct image, false self. I have a great image that I can project. Good student, good athlete, didn't give my parents any problems, stay out of the way, stay out of their hair, just ways to live, but not really living from the heart. Another book that I would recommend, I'd say more transformative than any book that I've read in the last 10 years, in terms of how, from a spiritual perspective, to have a healthy personality, to grow up and to mature, would be this book. It's called The Life Model, and the subtitle is Living from the Heart That Jesus Gave You, Learning How to Live Authentically. An awesome, awesome book in terms of helping you to develop the things that are necessary to live in a way in which, number one, you let God do His work, which is the creative work, and you do the work of cooperating and maturing at the same time. The authors are Friesen, Wilder, Bierling, Kopecky, you can come up afterwards and write that down and stuff. Develop distorted thoughts about self and life. Learn to lie and cover up for self-protection. Identity crisis, who am I? Stage 2. I'm trying to walk you through the stages of my life in a very quick way. Stage 2 was, well, it's time for me to fix myself. I knew some things were wrong. I had parents and I had a brother and other relatives who were pointing out all my weaknesses and flaws, so I better fix myself. What must I do to get others to like me? Answer, develop the right persona, student athlete. How can I get the affirmation and encouragement that I crave? Answer, perform at the highest possible level, A grades, perfectionism. My wife thought it was so funny. When I went through my doctoral program, I had straight A's, except one teacher had the audacity to give me an A-. B plus? Devastating. What did I do? I went back and talked her out of it. Gosh. What if that's not enough? What if I need a stage to perform on to get even more attention? Answer, will become a risk taker. I remember my senior year in high school going from Central California to San Diego for the state convention for DECA. How many of you ever belonged to DECA when you went to school? Distributive Education Clubs of America. All the business people were in that club. Okay, I was this quiet, shy, introverted kid. But I ran for vice president of the entire state and won. Somehow pulled it off, you know, I could just project the right persona at the right time. But it wasn't me. It wasn't really who I am as a person. But where can I get the admiration I long for? And what do I do with these hormones? Answer, girls, lots of girls. I can remember in junior high and high school almost having a different girlfriend every week. I remember having to get my block sweater back from one girl and give it to the next girl. It's been very painful to have to do this, Jeff. After my sophomore year of high school, my parents built their dream home in a major metropolitan urban area. And all of a sudden, I'd grown up in this small community of people, knew everybody, everybody knew me, comfortable. It fit my quiet personality. I had my place. But now I was a little fish in a big pond. Question arose again, who am I? So 1 Corinthians 15, 33 and 34, make no mistake, bad company is the ruin of a good character. Come back to a sober and upright life and leave your sinful ways. There are some who know nothing of God. To your shame, I say it. Because I really didn't know anything about the Lord, when I became this little fish in this big pond, I took on a whole new identity. I got with the wrong crowd. I know it's hard to believe, but at one time, I had very long hair, beads. I would have had tattoos and earrings if I lived today. Volkswagen bus with a surfboard sticking out the back. Drugs, alcohol. Got arrested 3 days before I turned 18 for selling LSD. God's grace. That felony, I spent 30 days in juvenile hall. First time for me that I was ever the minority. It was mostly Mexican American and black. First cellmate or roommate that I had, the first night I was there, he tried to commit suicide. He took a piece of glass, cut both sides of the vein, pulled his vein out, as blood all over the place. I was scared to death. I remember my dad coming down and sitting in the holding room with me. I remember him crying and saying, Mike, you finally got yourself into something that I cannot get you out of. And reality began to hit. I knew things needed to change. If goodness doesn't fill the hole, maybe badness will. It's the 60s and it's California and everything you can imagine. Identity crisis, not me. Now I moved into the period, and I've shared the story of how I got saved. I'm in Hinduism, transcendental meditation, taking drugs at college, and my best friend's mother sends us a Bible in the mail. And every night we burn incense, chant our mantras, and read the Bible. And then take drugs. It goes on for about 6 months. And I tell you what, the Bible, that good news for modern man, begins to just come alive. The character of Jesus. Oh my word. I knew there was truth there. Didn't know how to find it exactly, but I just kept reading. And I remember I don't remember the exact night. I just remember one night crying out to God. My Jewish girlfriend of 3 years My former was going to be my married partner, who I had lived with for a long period of time, had broken up with me. I was reading the Bible. I was lost. I was a vegetarian. I was 145 pounds. I was running 10 miles a day, trying to find meaning and purpose. And the Bible came alive. And I cried out to God, "Oh my God, I need you." And I don't know what happened, but I know the next morning when I woke up, the picture in my mind was I knew something had happened deep within me, a paradigm shift. And one of the things almost immediately that happened is I left school, moved back to California, and reconciled with my folks. I was saved. Dramatic conversion, reconcile with parents, move home. Parents become active in the faith. They both, I think, recommitted their life to Christ. At one time as kids, they had committed their life to Christ. My dad became the most amazing evangelist, winning people to Christ. And we developed a relationship that we'd never had before. I got very close to my dad. He became one of my best friends. He wasn't the best man in our wedding. Became a youth minister, go to Bible college, seminary. My mother called it cemetery. Find the right girl to marry. Woo! Have perfect children, have a perfect family, be a perfect pastor, and they all lived happily ever after. Getting saved fixes everything, doesn't it? Identity crisis. Who are we? Stage 4. It's time to fix my family. I met Jen on a blind date. Married her 10 months later. 4 days after we met, I proposed to her. But I'm not impulsive. Finished graduate school, got into full-time church work. I was driven and needed to prove myself. Slay dragons, conquer kingdoms. Jan was compliant and did anything asked of her. The result of distorted teachings. All of this could be amplified. It's just what a story, what a mess. Our daughter came along, difficult pregnancy, delivery, adjustments to a challenging infant. Our daughter only slept 4 or 5 hours a night. We lived in a basement apartment with no windows. Jan is an outdoor person, likes light. At one time in my own practice, I put her in an office with no windows. Really, really stupid. Because she needs light. She's a person of light. And so, I don't sleep very well to begin with. Our daughter wasn't sleeping much at all. I spent many nights in the church office on my floor trying to sleep. I remember one time leading a hymn in front of the church, and everybody was laughing as I was going through these 4 stanzas of this hymn. I couldn't figure out why I was laughing. I was so tired, I failed to realize the chorus part was on the other page. And I just totally skipped it. And everybody thought, they're just giggling and laughing. I'm like, well, doesn't he know what he's doing? It was just a very difficult time of life with a lot of stressors and a lot of bad teaching that made me and made us more legalistic than we should ever have been. I was often tired, moody, depressed, discontent, restless, irritable, quiet, except for church, of course. Turn it on. I'm your pastor. I'll fix it. I'll solve it. You know, I could be grumpy and complaining, and the phone would ring and pick up the phone and, oh yeah, hi, how are you? This is painful. Identity crisis, who can fix it? Stage 5, I can't fix it. I actually want to close with this part of the story and then read something to you, because I think it is very powerful. At one point, I'm a romanticist. I'm an idealist. Jan is a realist. She really knows what life is about. I have, like, all these fantasy thoughts about how life should be. And when it doesn't match up, well, I get crushed at times because I want it to be ideal. I want to arrive. I want to be in the right place. I want to have it all fixed. I want to be the perfect person. It doesn't work. It doesn't happen. So at one point, Jan had been saying for a number of years, can we go to counseling? If you think there's something wrong with this and we're not quite where we need to be, can we go to counseling? Oh, my pride would not allow that. I was the pastor. I was the counselor. I had the answers. I could fix it. Let's read another book. Let's pray more. One of our great strengths is we can pray together a lot. And we're really comfortable with that. And it's an awesome thing in our marriage. But I didn't want to go and admit to somebody else, I'm broken. So one morning, we're in bed and we have one of those discussions. Life isn't quite what I think it should be. Jan's crying, and I'm beside myself. I get out of bed and I walk over to her side of the bed. I'm going to pray for her again. I kneel down and I start to cry. And the only words that can come out of my mouth are, I can't fix this. I can't fix this. I can't fix this. End of myself. I have no other answers. I have no other things that I can employ and bring along to try and bring healing to my wife's poor heart. And so we go to counseling. And spend a week with a guy who I think is the best counselor I've ever been around. His insights are amazing. He's not perfect. He has his own problems. He and I are close friends. We talk about his problems. But he helped us in amazing ways. And began a healing process some 15 years ago. That just continues to today. And the biggest part of the healing process is trying to do exactly what this guy in this allegory is experiencing. So I want to close. What time can we close? 10:20. Cool. Thank you for letting me blabber on. This isn't my comfort zone, but I really, really sacredly hold that privilege. Jeff invited me to share with him. So, I've been here in the room of grace, give or take a few hours, nearly 6 months now. I can no longer objectively report on life in this new world. I know for sure I see things differently. Don't ask me to explain it. It's like trying to describe a color that others have never seen. One can only speak in terms of what the others know. And what they know is not enough to house this new concept. See, it's, well, sort of like a matted magenta in a pool of neon-tinted burnt sienna with rivulets of turquoise almond. It's all kind of fluorescent, but not, you know. No, I don't. So, 6 months, nothing has stunned me more. Now, he's living in the room of grace. He's come out of the room of good intentions, effort, self-will. He's come out of that room, he's in the room of grace. So now, 6 months, nothing has stunned me more than the quality and the health of the relationships in this room. I knew things would be different with God, and they are, beyond all that I know. But I didn't factor in this part. The way friends interact, protect, and enjoy each other alongside God is the most dramatic difference between the room of good intentions and the room of grace. One day I'm walking in the woods, winding up toward the bluff that overlooks the sea with my loud, pajama-clad friend. He likes to walk, and I like to walk with him. Neither of us is talking. He walks really fast. I've known him 6 months, but our friendship is more authentic and encouraging than any I've known in decades. I break my panting silence. So, you know, I'm still a mess. We both know that you're more mature than me. Why don't you address my stuff? Would you like me to address your stuff? No, not particularly. But it feels uneasy being around someone who knows your faults could address them, but doesn't. I'm waiting for a hammer to drop. You do see things in me that could improve, right? Yeah, sure. He shrugs with a smile. There are all sorts of stuff we see in each other. If it was that simple, just pointing out flaws and telling someone to fix them, don't you think that we'd all be better off by now? Yeah, but What if it was less important than anything, that anything ever gets fixed, and that nothing has to be? I stopped walking, standing in the middle of the trail. The sun is streaming down in beams through the canopy of leaves. It's like one of those religious paintings, only, real. Say that again? What you just said. I said, what if it was less important that anything ever gets fixed, and that nothing ever has to be hidden? That's it, I blurted out. Those words describe what I haven't been able to say. That's it. Nobody's trying to fix me here. He gestures forward. May we walk while you're having this epiphany? No, just stop for a minute. You have no idea how big this is for me. So why? Why what? When I was in the room of good intentions, I felt a consistent message everywhere I went, even with all the masks. It went like this. There's a bunch of things wrong with you. We'll give you a pass for a while, but eventually we'll present you with a list of things that need to be corrected. The sooner you get fixed, the happier we'll all be. I couldn't take it anymore. That was the unspoken message that drove me out. He smiles broadly and folds his arms. Well, listen to you. But why? I continued. Why is it different here? No one talks about it, but almost everyone lives this way. Remember the night I found you wandering back in the room of good intentions? I nodded. There's a way of seeing God in that room. Millions buy into it. It's that whole vision of Jesus there and you here. Your sin, a trash heap between the two of you. It's saying you believe that you're a saved sinner, who will always be a saved sinner. Nothing's really been changed in you. Maybe you get some fairy dust if you beg hard enough. Maybe the Holy Spirit does something, but you are basically a not very good person who's trying to be very, very good. You're just a sinner who's going to heaven because of something God did. Not much more. Millions of folks are living their daily lives out of that conviction. I saw myself that way for a long time, still tempted to sometimes. Such a picture doesn't buy the astounding reality of Christ in you. Instead, He's out there. It doesn't believe you are actually righteous, only theoretically righteous. To them, you're just righteous enough to get into the gates, but not nearly strong enough to face your own issues. Capisci? He doesn't wait for a response. So you're left with the belief that if anything is going to get done, it's going to happen on the wings of willpower and good intentions. It'll happen if only you get serious enough. It sounds noble, but it's like a tar pit. It keeps you stuck in your repetitive mantra. I'm not enough. It can't bring you out of your, it can't bring out your new heart. It can only appeal to the broken place in you where sin is given life. The Bible calls it the flesh. It's not your skin, muscle, or anything physical, but a living, active principle inside you working against you. It has no power to do right, but we appeal to it over and over and over again. All along, we have the nature of God fixed with us from the moment that we put our belief in Him. We have God's love inside us, waiting to be accessed and trusted, available to address our sins and failures, our hopes and our dreams. It's all there, untapped, while we're running around trying to impress God with promises of self-denial. It sounds like we're taking sin seriously, but it's just the opposite. Yep, just the opposite. Now in the room of grace, there's a different goal, a different motive, a different set of convictions. At the core, we're just learning to trust and depend on our new identity. We're learning to live out of who God says we are, even on our worst day. So a statement like, it is less important that anything gets fixed, but that nothing is hidden, is an example of living out of our new identity. It's a realization that sin finds its power when I hide. That nobody gets fixed. That we've already been changed and now get to mature into who we really are. We're starting to discover that this new power is released when we trust it. when I'm safe enough to tell the worst about myself to someone else. See, that's what we're learning to do here. We want to get close enough, be safe and trusted enough, that when the moment comes where God reveals something hard to face, we won't have to run and hide. You've done that for me, you know, right? Thanks, kid. I sure want to. I wasted a lot of years trying to make people obey and getting obliged compliance instead. Ask my kids. They tell you what that gig felt like. Say that again? Say what again? That part about trying to make people obey and getting compliance instead. I think you just said it. Right. That's another big idea I haven't known. Why don't I know that? Maybe because it wasn't taught or modeled to us. Remember those people that you saw camped along the road after leaving the room of good intentions? That's what they experienced. Religious authority, figuring out a way to make them obey, appealing to external means instead of the new nature. They tried so long to oblige, to do the right thing, to make everyone happy, but nobody showed them how to live out of their new nature. They only learned how to look right, how to pacify the demands of someone keeping score. They wanted to obey from the heart, but nobody gave them the chance. Someone was always watching to see if they got out of line, instead of waiting to applaud them when they began to trust Christ in themselves. Eventually, they just got disgusted and weary of the game. They stopped playing. Many go their entire lives trying to play this game. They make up the room of good intentions. But those wandering along the path, they just got bitter or hurt about playing the game. So they opted out. They are the real victims, aren't they? I guess they are, kid. I guess they are. How does anyone ever find their way to anything authentic? Pain, I'm afraid. God allows some pain to awaken our hearts. Many of us are awakened to the pain of realizing that we cannot control our world the way we thought we could. We're stuck with unresolved issues, symptoms we're trying to fix without the help of anyone else. He gestures for us to set off again. So we do, but the pace is slower this time. Sometimes it's not that you don't want to let others in, but that everyone wants to solve their issues, so you won't embarrass them so much. I couldn't find anyone in the room of good intentions willing to stand with me. Everybody just wanted to fix things. It's too risky, he says. They're already beating themselves up for not having their life together. Their shame is so thick you can cut it. He pauses before a slow grin creases his face. But what if instead there was a friend so safe that the worst aspects of me could be known? I would not be loved less, but actually be loved more for opening up. That thought, my friend, is what broke me open. It was exactly opposite of what I'd always feared. 2 minutes longer? Is that possible? Just to finish. I let those words hover in the air like I'm hearing lyrics of an old song or a quote from a book that once framed the way I saw life. For a long time now, I've believed if others knew this dark part about me, I'd be pitied. I'd lose my seat at the table. I'd just learn to bury those pains